Welcome to Keiser University Multidisciplinary Center's webinar. Topic today is time management, presented by Dr. Manny Rosa, Graduate School of Education professor and advisor. We would like to introduce Dr. Manny Rosa.
All right, thank you very much, and Happy New Year to everyone that is on listening on demand or present. What a great way to start 2019 by making sure that we maximize the most of our time. And what better way to do that than through time management? So throughout this workshop, you will be expected and be able to identify strategies to save time to accommodate student needs, identify ways to prioritize teacher responsibilities, and identify technological resources that could aid in time management. Now, I'm sure when you all came back from the winter break and started the school year, your kids, your students came into the classroom already standing attention, perfect. The break did not do anything to them, and there's probably no reason for this time management workshop whatsoever. But if your students came back and were not paying attention and were used to having three weeks or 10 days off, and you have to now start all over again with setting the expectations, then time may be wasting in your class. So we're going to talk a little bit about time management as far as personal time management and time management with how to save time and maximize the time that you have in the classroom so that students can get the learning time and you can do as much as you can to make sure our students are doing well on our exams. So I want you to take a moment, if you are watching this on record, I want you to take a moment to ask yourself the following questions. Do you often feel that you have too much to do and not enough time? Keep in mind there's only 24 hours a day and 7 days in a week, and we all have that same amount of time. So there's little beyond our control. Do you feel like you are often playing catch up and missing deadlines? Do you feel overwhelmed with what is expected of you as a teacher? Do you feel stressed by what you do not get done? And do you often work late or on the weekends? So if you answered yes to any of these, then time management is for you. So this workshop will provide some tips, but you will need to follow up and explore further in more detail what you can do, especially if you have 4 out of 5 or all 5 out of 5. So what possibly does a teacher need to do anyway? Why would they need to manage their time? Don't they just sit in front of the classroom and turn pages? Well, of course, as teachers, we understand, no, that is not the answer. So here is a list of things that you do, and I'm sure that you can add more to it. But to remind you, on any given day, any given moment, every given second of instruction time, you could be creating lesson plans, grading assessments, creating the informal and formal assessments. Believe it or not, you may be pulled into meetings, have to produce reports, work on budgets, check emails, then actually deliver the lesson plan. Oh, maybe you'll squeeze in a parent conference. Maybe you'll be assigned morning, lunch, or afternoon duty. Maybe there'll be some odd chance that a student would misbehave and you have to discipline the student. Maybe your principal will want to talk to you about professional development. Perhaps you'll have to put notes in an IEP. And of course, there is other duties as assigned. So just looking at this sheet, it is not surprising that the task of getting in all these responsibilities within your time frame could be overwhelming. So hopefully these tips will help make that less overwhelming and maximize your time. So I thought this was an interesting quote about decision making, and you may not realize it, and you may think it's even more, even less, but research shows that the average classroom teacher will make more than 1,500 educational decisions daily. In an average 6-hour school day, that is more than 4 decisions every minute. And of course, those decisions take time. So doing as much pre-planning as possible could help make those decisions go faster. but no one can control how students are going to react that day, what students are going to need more attention, what students are just going to stop listening. So obviously this could be more or less, and there's only so much control we do have. So I like quotes. So I thought these two quotes I thought were striking, because time management, also we're going to talk about prioritizing and balance and work-life balance. So Stephen Covey is very famous for producing different materials and different workshops on time management. And you'll probably have heard of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So he is the author of that. And he suggests that the key is not spending time, but in investing it. So really thinking about the limited time you do have with all the responsibilities and what's key, what will give you the most bang for your buck, where can you spend the right percentage of time and get the maximum outcome. And then Thomas Jefferson said, determined never to be idle, no person will have occasion to complain of the want of time who never loses any. It is wonderful how much can be done if we are always doing. Now, your doctor may not agree with this, because if you're always doing, maybe your blood pressure will be high. So, but let's just take it as is, as you're doing it naturally and healthy, and then going home and meditating so that you can have it all done. You must learn, and the key, and I'll probably be repeating this throughout, is to learn to work both effectively and efficiently, otherwise known as work smarter, not harder. Anytime, any decision, anything you are making, you should be asking yourself, is this the best use of my time? And that would be a key strategy. Now, if you're unhappy with your career and you ask, is this the best use of my time? I don't want you just leaving your teaching positions, but think about it in a positive manner. When you think about your teaching responsibilities and you decide what you want to do, have the question, is this the best use of my time, in your wheelhouse. All right, so first we're going to talk about, when you're allocating time, whether it's the day before or the morning of, these are some things you could be considering to allocate time in the classroom. If you have 6 hours of teaching time in a row, or if you have less restricted classes, these are things you could be thinking about. How you create your tasks and your designs and your lessons. What is the strategy you use and the pattern of interaction implemented? This would be when you think about how your students are going to be interacting and work on tasks and lesson plans. You should be factoring in that time. What is the degree of complexity for each task? Are you maybe assigning a task for a time which the time period does not allow or does not call for? It could also be the opposite. You want to give a complex task because you also want to spend time grading papers while the students are working on the task, and let them be self-directed and mentor each other. Students' attention span and readiness. Research more and more shows that the average human attention span is lessening. And with the increase in social media and technology, I believe that's being enhanced even further. So it's factoring into account students' attention span and when is the most optimal time: morning, afternoon, before a break, during a break, after a break. And it will depend, of course, on your students. Students' abilities and needs. When dealing with students, all types of students, they're going to have different needs. Some are going to need more hands-on. Some are going to need more more visual and will need more visual cues. Some will need lots of repetition. So thinking about what their needs are. And then finally, the pace of the lesson. If you're allocating time and you strategizing, then figuring out what your pace is going to be for each criteria. So let's say, we're going to talk about 3 different scenarios that you can come up with when planning your time and when creating a lesson plan. So for one, let's say you're running out of time. What can be the cause for running out of time? Your plan was overambitious and included unrealistic timeframes. You underestimated how challenging students would find the task, and you lost time by being less efficient than you could have been. And that could be beyond your control because of some of the students that are more challenging and disruptive. But it's important that you reflect and figure out what the cause is so that way you can address the cause. Some responses could be set realistic time for each activity and make sure to wrap up the lesson in a way that assesses students' acquisition. So constantly reminding the key points of the lesson in the beginning and then wrapping it up at the end. And you may need to adjust your objectives for the next day's lesson. Because you didn't meet your original goal, then that may ultimately impact the following day as well. So these are some things, if you're running out of time, and if you have a habit of doing that, then think about these responses and determine the cause. What if you still have time left? So your practice content may not have been challenging enough. Maybe you didn't have enough activities for the allotted time. Maybe you underestimated your students' present mastery, understanding of the material. And also maybe just students just were not interested. And when you said, does anyone have any questions? No one raised their hand because maybe it could be that they weren't paying attention. So these are some things, if you don't have enough time, some possible responses is, of course, utilize Bloom's taxonomy and ask more higher level order questions that would produce higher level thinking. And also challenge your students to ask more complex questions. You may need to role model that by explaining to them and demonstrating the types of questions that they would ask. You may want to extend practice sessions to include a review of previous lesson objectives, but avoid the trap of reviewing material simply because the students enjoy the topic. Constantly push through it towards your end goal or proceed to the next objective in your sequence. So if you do get ahead, you may just want to move on to the next topic. But in a previous workshop, if you watch a differentiated learning, it does encourage you to have different activities for different levels so that in the case that there is not enough time, then you would have already in your toolkit something else for the more advanced students, and then something for the students that need more support, or pairing them up so that they could work together. And what if students still do not understand? So they're nodding their head, yes, I understand. You do an informal or a formal assessment and you realize that they are not getting, they're just not getting it. So it could be that you didn't allocate enough time for the practice. It could be that the lesson material was more challenging to students than anticipated. And it just could be a mismatch between patterns of interaction and tasks. You assign them certain materials and they just were not absorbing it based on the lesson that was taught or based on the readings. So here are some responses you can try. Extend your guided practice if students still need your support. Don't rush it. This is the critical phase that will shape your students' comprehensions of the concepts involved. The more deliberate, substantial, and in-depth is your shaping, the less independent practice your students will require. So once again, role modeling that behavior. And if it doesn't seem like additional practice will be sufficient to clear up student misunderstanding, consider reteaching the material and or changing the pattern of interactions. This can be done by group work or by pairing students so they can think about the topic and then pair them up and then share what they've learned. So these are different strategies to save time, because if students don't understand, or if you're finished early or not finished enough, then that does take away the time. So this is about utilizing your time wisely when planning the various lessons that you're gonna plan throughout your day. And then taking the time to reflect, okay, this worked, this didn't work, and giving yourself notes so that if you're repeating the grade, teaching the same grade next year, then you're able to reflect on that. And even though the class makeup will be different and you could get different results, it's always good to know and to have that reflection sooner rather than later. So for those students that are more needy and need that structure, it's very important to create those rules and routines. Our first workshop, we talked about, to kick off this series, we talked about morning meetings. And in those morning meetings is when you could do a lot of this reviewing the rules and setting the expectations for the day. But you want to make sure you establish rules and routines to reduce the time lost on disruptions and disciplinary situations. One strategy may be to have a timekeeper, especially when you're doing group work. It could be a physical clock that's on the wall, because that would help some of our students that are more visual, or just having someone in each group be the timekeeper. So with group activities, you want to allocate a range of roles within group work activities. So some possible roles are the note taker, the timekeeper, and they can take turns monitoring, so that one student with each group has to keep the others on task and on time. When you're trying to save time, the more the students are sensitive to time, and the more your class can grasp that concept and wrap their heads around it, it could help in maximizing your time, where you're rewarding students for keeping in time, and then also providing some opportunities, reflection to role model again the following day through your morning meeting if times were not met. So, and this also goes to our book ending or brightening, and that is to ensure that both beginnings and endings are clear to all students. Students should be able to visualize, whether through your verbiage or through what they see on the board, exactly what's going to happen at what time, and then allocate that time and follow that accordingly. So some sample thing you could say, some sample verbiage of what this looks like when you're saying it out loud. You could say, for example, everyone has finished the worksheet. Jenny, would you sum up the main elements of the story for us? Okay, now that we understand the main elements of the story, let's take 5 minutes to read and know what happened in the story, which begins on page 67. You will have a 5-minute reading period. So it's giving clear directions and expectations, and at this time you would set the timer and students will be able to follow along to see when that 5-minute period ends. So you do this in the beginning and at the end to make sure all these expectations are clear for students, which will ultimately save you time to focus on other things. All right, so here are some tips to get the most out of your day and the most out of a classroom period. And we're going to be going back and forth between classroom tips, tips for your own personal time management, and then just tips in general that you can use if you're not having the greatest of days. Imagine that happening. So first, my advice would be for you to create a routine. And you create a routine, you can either use, it all depends on your working style. You can use the first 30 minutes to schedule and plan the day, or some of you may need to do the last 30 minutes to plan for the day prior. So it would all depend if you're a morning person or if you're an evening person, or later on in the day person. So if you're a morning person, then you may want to get up and take those first 30 minutes to breathe, to relax, and to plan your day. If you're better off in the evening or after class, then take the last 30 minutes to do that. Some people would suggest doing that at night, but it all depends on your level. If you want to go home and just completely cut off, then it may not be, or if thinking at night keeps you up and keeps your mind working, then you may not be the type of person that should do stuff right before they go to bed. So, but in essence, take 30 minutes to schedule. Have priorities. You want to start with the most urgent task, and that should be ones that must be accomplished to keep the class functioning. So what's the most important standard you're trying to teach? What is the most item you want to review that you think students didn't get the day prior? But start with the most urgent task, or it could be a meeting with a parent, or putting notes in the IEP, or following up on a discipline situation, whatever that task is amongst the many we talked about, you want to do that. Keep a detailed time log. Depending on your working style, I would suggest maybe 15 or 20-minute blocks to keep your mind refreshed, and maybe a 5 or 10-minute break in between. But if you don't have that luxury, whatever would be best for you and your working style. You want to maintain a visible schedule for students to refer to throughout the day. For students on the spectrum, this is very important they have these constant visual reminders of what's going to happen throughout the day, and so that they know exactly what to expect. So having that, whether it be through actual times or perhaps pictures or images, you want to make that schedule visible. And you want to assign homework that reinforces skills already taught in class with simple instructions. There's a great debate about how much homework students should be assigned, especially when they get to middle school and high school, how many hours they should be spending. So you really want to make sure that the homework you do give is intentional and that the instructions are simple. So students can really get home. They're not wasting time trying to figure out the instructions, or you're not wasting time explaining multiple times, what the assignment is. So from a time management perspective, it saves both you and the student. So you can focus more on what your priorities are. Here are some more tips to organize, to save you time. And some of this relates to the actual layout of your classroom. So you want to explain to students exactly what the intended learning intentions of the lessons are. And you probably want to have that visible on the board. What are the outcomes for the day? You want to have smooth transitions when assignments are over or tasks are completed. You want to make sure that you are ready to go very swiftly to the next topic, maybe by assigning students tasks or to review or to summarize. Use countdown reminders. Some examples: you have 3 minutes left, you now have 1 minute left, to make sure students can see the clock in your classroom. And we've talked about that. Make sure your materials are ready. You may want to create different folders that would demonstrate that your materials are ready, so you know exactly at what point what you need to do and where to grab that. We'll talk about that later. Present your instructions visually, and also on paper to tailor to the different learning styles. Check for understanding. It's not uncommon, and I'm sure you've done this already, to just continuously, when you repeat something, to have a student repeat it back to you. This also gets them engaged and involved. Choose the most effective type of teaching, and this mirrors back to our differentiated learning workshops. So if you have time to catch that on demand as well, there'll be some useful tips on that. And one suggestion is to use homework trays. You could divide it up in however you want, but for this suggestion, red could be completed homework, green could mean get your homework assignment from here, blue could be obtain homework assignments that were given out when you were absent, and yellow could be place your incomplete homework. If students are able to follow this and it's visual and they know that this is the system, then it saves you time from explaining where to put homework, where to obtain their homework, and where to place incomplete homework. So think about those. It doesn't have to be color tabs. It could be numbers. It could be animals. It could be whatever your heart desires, as long as it's not like martini glasses or anything like that. As long as it's very sensitive to our students and their needs. That would be the advice for homework trays. Here are some personal tips that'll help you to manage your time, to think about it, what you can do in your classroom. You want to identify your time leaks and find ways to plug them. Most often, this may be a student that is being disruptive, or just the energy of the class, or coming back from a break or from a weekend. So try and analyze and be prepared, and then find some solutions that will work. Monitor your energy and concentration levels. If you're a morning person, afternoon person, that may indirectly impact your delivery of lessons and grading, or when you should be grading or completing those IEPs. So think about that. Use your peak time effectively to do your most important task. This goes back to whether you're a morning person, an afternoon person, evening person. Whenever is your most energetic, that's when you should do your most important tasks, if time allows. It could be calling parents, meeting with the principal, doing classroom observations if that's in your role, etc. If you have too much on your plate, just say no. And I know that's easier said than done, especially for new teachers who want to be impressive. But I'm going to give you in the next slide some tips on how to politically correct, just say no. Get organized. Too much time is wasted looking for things. And students can tell if they look at your desk, or parents if they're coming in, or if you're getting a classroom observation and your desk is messy, that may look bad on you. So, and it may be causing you time. So here are some tips on that. Have a fingertip or routine information. So a folder, you want to create folders or files where things that you need on a regular basis, you can have that handy, phone list, regular forms. A to be discussed file, and that could be where you put regular staff meetings or staff members that you interact with. Especially if you're meeting with parents and you're teaching a subject and there are going to be multiple of you in the room, and you want to follow up with notes, that's where you may want to put your information. Current projects, if you're working on any trips or camps, or if you've been assigned to a committee or coaching, that's where you can put that. And then you can do something called a tickler file, where you make 1 through 31. You make your files 1 through 31. You number them, and then each day of the month is that's what that represents. So if you are meeting with a parent on, let's say, at the end of the month, January 31st, but on January 28th you want to write the notes and have all the students' work handy, then you would put that file and those notes on the January 28th tab, on the 28 tab, so that way by 31 it's already done. Then you would move it to the 31. So if you need more information on that, you can, my email will be at the beginning and at the end, so definitely I can help you with that. You want to use one daily planner or app. You want to refrain from using multiple because that can get confusing. So using a planner can help you save your time. And when it comes to emails, and I have personally done this, or try to do this, you want every time you read an email or something comes across your desk to act on it the first time you read it or touch it. Dr. Miller will attest that I am obsessed with my emails, and I'm obsessed with my inbox, and I will not delete until I have finished what's there, and I'm constantly reviewing my emails to make sure they've been done or they've been followed up with. So if you get something on your desk, and sometimes you probably a student will be disruptive and you don't want to make that parent call, but if they called you back or emailed you, then you may want to just get that done, and because ultimately that will save you time in the end. All right, so just say no. Here are some things that I know are easier said than done. But if the ultimate goal is to save time so that you're focusing on the class and that your students in the classroom that are in front of you are maximizing their learning and getting the most out of their classroom time, then saying no is justified. So here are some tips or things you can say. And if we were all live, we would be role playing and you would be saying this too. I'd really like to, but I'm overcommitted right now and don't think I'd be able to do it justice. There's a polite way to say no. Thanks for asking, but I really need to spend more quality time with my children and spouse. There's an opportunity to say no. I appreciate your confidence in me, but I have other tasks that demand a lot of my time at the moment. I have a lot of commitments already on my calendar. Sorry, I can't help this time, and emphasize this time so that way they know maybe this is just a temporary thing. And no, thank you, I'm not ready to take on that additional responsibility just yet. So not only is it the words, but it's also your facial expressions and the way you say it. If you say, no, thank you, I'm not ready to take that on, then obviously that may be a little bit more concerning than if you politely and honestly, talk about how you just don't have the time to do that. So talk this over with your supervisors. I know this is easier said than done. You may work at a school where the culture is not to say no. So maybe there'll be a little bit more hesitancy. Or maybe you could be the pioneer and be the first to say no, and maybe that'll start a trend. Once again, if you need individual advice, just email me. Speaking of emails, if you are ruled by email, and sometimes that's hard if you're already in the classroom and you don't have any breaks, then email is either in the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. But here are some tips for emails. You want to move emails out of your inbox. Make sure you do it now, if that's possible, and act on it now. So, or just read the email only when you have time to act on them. So if you look at the subject line and you're not gonna have time to work on that, then maybe don't click on the email. Set aside 2 or 3 times each day to respond. So that would probably mean that you're not looking at your smartphone if you automatically get emails into your smartphone, especially during the day if you need to be focusing on the classroom. So set aside 2 or 3 times. Delete if it isn't necessary to save. So if you don't want a cluttered desk, you probably don't want a cluttered inbox either. So if you don't need the email, then please make sure you delete it. Create a pending follow-up folder. If you're ruled by your inbox and you want to organize your inbox, then you may want to create a pending folder, and then you put all the messages that you want to work on in that folder. So there's an opportunity to do that. And then also save relevant emails in those folders. So if you have parents and IEPs and maybe creative lesson plans, those are stuff you want to do there. And then unsubscribe to irrelevant resources. So if you signed up for maybe education.com or Teacher Pay and you're no longer using those services, then you may want to just unsubscribe to those, and that'll help you have less emails. And then finally, to help yourself, to focus on yourself, because you are only as good as if you're not feeling well, chances are your students are going to notice, and your students are going to not be able to maximize their time. So when you feel like you're lagging or you're taking too much time, here are some self-care strategies. You may want to keep items on the desk for an energy boost. That could look like tea, chocolate, protein, a stress ball. Once again, make sure it's something that is followed by the school's policy and nothing that will get you in trouble. 2-minute strategies. You may want to take 2 minutes to relax. So that could mean a yoga pose, a walk, meditation. Unleash your creativity. If poetry or art puts you in a better mood or makes you calmer, then do that. Connect with others. You could share projects with fellow teachers, make positive phone calls to parents. I was speaking to a teacher the other day who was very excited because the kid was misbehaving, and a lot of it was due to the medication the student was on. So the student tried new medication and was behaving better in class, and he was very excited to call the parent and actually have the conversation, and that parent did appreciate that. So that's something. And then volunteer if that helps as well. Look for the positive. I know sometimes you want to focus on that class that was disruptive or the student that wasn't listening, but focus on the positive. Maybe a challenged student, a struggling student that got it or listened or was able to understand the material. Focus on the positive, or you may want to have quotes or a notebook of positive aspirations or student stories that you keep, will reminding you of when you made a difference. Sometimes going home and relaxing, whether that be through TV. I am a big TV fan, so I would suggest Netflix or Hulu. Hot bath, if you have a bathtub. Music, and then meditate. And then sometimes just getting your body moving. I have this wonderful Apple Watch, and it reminds me all the time that I need to get my body moving. So you may need to invest in that. But you can run, dance, yoga, walk, all these things to make sure that you are in motion and getting the blood flowing. There are also some online resources that you can use, and these are just some of them. But I know there are a handful out there, and some of your schools may also have invested in these. So number one is Toodle-Doo. I guess I'll say that again, Toodle-Doo. And it's an app for organizing tasks, setting goal deadlines, and tracking productivity. It can track everything you need to get done in one organized place. It has your to-do list compiled and categorized by folders, listed by level of priority, organized by due date. You can set alarms for time-sensitive tasks. You can search by word. So there is a free version, and there's also paid subscriptions starting at $19.99 per year. It sounds like an advertisement, but it's not. I encourage you to use the free version. There's also a Focus Keeper, and this timekeeping app helps you work on tasks in 25-minute increments with 5-minute breaks in between. So that goes back to what I was saying earlier, to work in 15 to 20 minutes. Well, this one is 25 minutes. It recommends that you divide your work into manageable chunks of time to become more effective on the job and avoid burnout. This can be helpful for teachers grading mountains of papers and projects. And there is a free version and there is a paid version of $1.99. So, Slack is another app for collaborating on projects. You can send messages to other collaborators, upload documents and photos, share links, have video chats, and organize various materials all in one place. So this, of course, this has a free plan, but there's also a paid plan that has more options. There is Remind, and I think this is probably the most common. The Remind app helps you keep parents in the loop and stay in touch with students via text without revealing your personal contact information. If you're a club advisor, this could be, or you write newsletters, this can be helpful too. That helps remind the students. If you're spending too much time doing that stuff, that you can just send a quick remind. And this is free, and most likely your school or your district has a plan as well. And then there's Rescue Time, an app which will send weekly reports to indicate where you're spending your time. Apple also has this thing, Screen Time. If you have the latest phone or an upgraded phone, it tells you how much time you're spending on your phone on your screen. So these are apps, online resources that you can use. And if you are receiving the monthly multidisciplinary newsletter, then you probably see some apps as well that not only focus on time management, but other things as well. All right, so in conclusion, I would want to just tell you that, go back to the first question and think and raising the question of, is this worth my time? Is this the best use of my time? And figuring out, when I first started in this career, working in education, right? I'm a professor for Keiser University. But when I first started, my supervisor, I was working like 13, 14 hours a day, trying to impress my boss. And because I was young and I had no family here when I moved to Florida, and she told me, she said, Manny, there's some times where you can spend 80% of the time and get 100% results. And there are some times where you could spend 150% of your time and still get 100% results. So I guess that was a way of saying, it's not about the hours, it's about working smarter and not harder. So that's all I have for today. If anyone has any questions and answers, I'll have the answers if you have questions.
Dr. Rosa, I was looking to see if we had any questions at this time. From our participants, I don't see any questions. You have given us so many great strategies in terms of not just time management in a daily sense, but also for planning and using email, like you said. That is such a great way to be in terms of being able to come up with ideas on how to work through emails and how to keep the inbox organized. That is a tremendous organizational tool that perhaps we're not really taught how to do that. It's usually like an individualized, I guess, preference, but over time we realize there's some strategies that we can do to keep organized and does increase the productivity and time management.
Yeah, and I think I think some of the benefits of teaching should be that you get in there at 7 a.m. or whenever your time is and you leave at 3:30. That should be a benefit, and especially, but I know that teachers are working nights and working weekends, and so I think maximizing the time, especially for new teachers, is important, and it takes a lot of things to balance that.
We would love for you to please visit our website at kumc.keiseruniversity.edu, as well as our Facebook page at Keiser UMDC. Please like us. We post a lot of things going on, not just here at our center, but as well as in the areas of the 8 districts we work with. A lot of agency events going on, district events. So please feel free to like us on Facebook. And for any questions or to request services, contact our center. You can complete the Contact Us form on our website, or feel free to call us at either one of these phone numbers. Again, we would like to thank Dr. Rosa, our presenter today, as well as all of you for joining us, and our Keiser University Multidisciplinary Center team and staff for their support. Here's Dr. Rosa. And we say thank you. Thank you so much for a great webinar today, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great day.